$500,000, that's the number on John's screen. He stares at it on a Tuesday morning, coffee going cold. 22 years of saving and the account finally crossed $500,000. John is 40. He earns $91,000 a year. By every visible measure, he just made it. But here's what nobody tells you about this exact moment. The day you hit $500,000 is the day you're most likely to destroy it, not lose it slowly. Destroy it, because something changes in your brain at this number. The portfolio is now bigger than your paycheck can rescue. For 22 years, John's savings did the heavy lifting. He'd add $12,000 a year, and that money mattered. But at $500,000, the math flips. A single bad decision now costs more than a whole year of work. And John doesn't know that yet. He just feels rich. That feeling is the trap. Most people treat $500,000 like a finish line. It's not. It's the most dangerous mile of the entire race. So before you celebrate, before you upgrade anything, watch what happens to John over the next 10 years. Because the data shows exactly where this goes. And the gap between the right move and the wrong one is bigger than the $500,000 itself. Let me show you the hidden math behind the moment you hit $500,000. Here's the first thing nobody explains. At $500,000, your money starts out-earning you. Run the numbers. At a 7% return, that portfolio generates $35,000 a year on its own. John earns $91,000 at his job, so his money is now working a second full-time salary in the background. It never sleeps, it never calls in sick, and for the first time. In his life, the market is doing more than his savings ever could. Think about what $35,000 a year really means. That's a teacher's salary, earned by money that's asleep. It shows up whether John works or not. It shows up on weekends. It shows up while he's on vacation. Most people spend their whole lives trading hours for dollars. At $500,000, John just hired an employee who works every hour for free and never quits. That's the quiet power of this number, and almost nobody feels it arrive. This is the acceleration most people never see coming, getting from 0 to 1. $100,000 took John almost 8 years. 8 years of grinding, cutting, and second-guessing. But going from $500,000 to $1 million, that takes far less time. At 7%, money doubles roughly every 10 years. So John's $500,000 quietly becomes $1 million by age 50. He doesn't add a single extra dollar. The compounding does it for him. Here's the part that should stop you cold. At $500,000 less. Then half of that balance came from John's own paychecks. Read that again. The majority of his money was made by money. His contributions built the engine. But now the engine is bigger than the driver. This is the exact moment compounding takes the wheel. And most people, right here, do something that throws it in reverse. Here's a way to picture it. For the first decade, you're pushing a snowball uphill by hand. Every dollar you save is muscle. It's hard and it's slow and the snowball barely grows. Then you crest the hill around $500,000. Now the snowball starts rolling on its own. It picks up snow without you. Your job changes completely. You're no longer pushing, you're just steering and trying not to knock it off a cliff. Most people don't realize the hill is behind them. They keep straining when they should be steering. And steering is a different skill entirely. Pushing rewards effort, steering rewards restraint. The person who got to $500,000 was rewarded for working harder, saving more, grinding longer. But the person who gets from $500,000 to $1 million is rewarded for doing less, touching less, and panicking less. That's why so many great savers turn into mediocre investors. The exact trait that built the pile, constant action, is the trait that now puts it at risk. Because here's what actually happens to most people at this number. They feel rich, so they start spending like it. John's coworker hit $500,000 the same year. Her name is Carla. Carla is 32, and she got there even faster than John. Same milestone, same market, same numbers on the screen. But Carla and John are about to make two completely different choices. And 10 years from now, the gap between them will be staggering. Let's keep this fair. Both of them did the hard part. Both saved for years. Both resisted the temptation to spend in their 20s and 30s. Neither one is reckless. Neither one is stupid. They are exactly the kind of people who should win. And that's what makes this so important. Because the thing that destroys the $500,000 isn't a crash. It's not a scam. It's a series of small, reasonable-sounding decisions that feel completely normal. And here is what makes their story worth watching. They didn't start at different places. On that first Tuesday, John and Carla had nearly identical balances, similar jobs, similar discipline. If you lined up their statements side by side, you couldn't tell them apart. Everything that follows, the entire gap, comes from how they each answered one quiet question. What do I do now that the hard saving is done? Same starting line, one question. Two completely different finish lines. So watch Carla first. The month she crossed 500,000, Carla felt something shift. She'd been driving the same paid-off Honda for 9 years. She told herself she'd earned an upgrade. So she financed a new SUV. $48,000, 6% interest, 6 years of payments. It felt like a reward. It felt small against a $500,000 net worth. And that's exactly how lifestyle creep works. It never feels like a mistake in the moment. Then came the apartment upgrade. Then the better vacations. Then the dinners she stopped checking the price on. None of it felt extreme. Each choice was maybe $400 or $500 more a month. But here's what nobody tells you about lifestyle creep. The money you spend isn't the real cost. The real cost is what that money would have become. Every $1,000 Carla stopped investing at 32 was worth nearly $8,000 by retirement. John saw the same milestone differently. When he hit 500,000, he made one rule. He would invest half of every raise automatically before he could feel it. His income kept climbing. His lifestyle barely moved. He didn't live like a monk. He just refused to let his spending grow as fast as his paycheck. And that single rule, invest half of every raise, did more for John's future than any stock he ever picked. Here's the math that separates them. Carla's lifestyle creep cost her about $600 a month in lost investing. That's $7,200 a year, not going into the market. Over the next 18 years at 7%, that missing money costs her around $260,000. She never sees that loss. There's no statement for it. It's the silent kind of poor that looks exactly like a comfortable life, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Here's the cruel part of lifestyle creep. It scales with your success. The more your portfolio grows, the more you feel entitled to spend. So the exact moment your money could compound the hardest is the moment you're most tempted to drain it. Carla didn't feel poor. She felt like she was finally enjoying her money. And every single purchase was defensible on its own. That's the genius of the trap. There's never one big mistake to point at. There's just a slow leak that never sets off an alarm. Now multiply Carla across a whole life. The new car becomes a habit of new cars every 5 years. The nicer apartment becomes a nicer mortgage. The casual upgrades become a baseline she can never walk back. Lifestyle creep doesn't just cost you the money you spend. It raises the cost of your entire life, which means you now need a bigger portfolio to retire. It hits you twice, it shrinks the pile, and it grows the target. Few things are more expensive than slowly getting used to nicer things. Now here's the second thing that destroys the 500,000, fees. And this one is so quiet that most people defend the very thing draining them. The month John hit $500,000, he got a call. A financial advisor, warm and reassuring, said his finances were getting complicated. Time for professional management. The fee sounded tiny. Just 1% a year. 1%. On a $500,000 account, who would even notice that? Let me show you what 1% actually does. John's portfolio, left alone in low-cost index funds, would grow from $500,000 to about $2.7 million over 25 years at 7%. With that 1% advisor fee skimmed off every single year. It grows to roughly $2.15 million instead. The difference is around $560,000. Stop and feel that number. The fee didn't cost 1%. It cost more than the entire $500,000 he started with. Here's why that 1% hits so hard. It's not 1% of your money. It's 1% of your money every year, forever, including all the growth that money would have earned. When the advisor takes $10,000 this year, that's not just $10,000 gone. It's $10,000 that would have compounded for the next 25 years. Run the numbers on that, and a small fee becomes a small fortune. Most people never run that number. They just sign. Now, a good advisor can be worth it. Some genuinely save you from disasters that cost more than their fee. This isn't about avoiding all help. It's about knowing what you're paying. The question is never just, what's the fee? The question is, what's the fee every year compounded across your whole life? Because on a growing $500,000 portfolio, 1% isn't a service charge. It's a silent partner who takes a bigger cut than you do. And fees have a quieter cousin that hits at this exact stage. Taxes. At $500,000, your money starts throwing off real gains and the government wants its share. Most people at this level are still holding investments in regular taxable accounts. Every time they sell a winner, they trigger a tax bill they never planned for. John learned to fill up his tax-advantaged accounts first. The 401k, the IRA, the HSA. Every dollar he sheltered there was a dollar the tax man couldn't touch for decades. Same investment, completely different outcome. Here's the simple version of the rule. It's not what you earn that matters. It's what you keep. A 7% return inside a tax-sheltered account is worth far more than a 7% return that gets taxed every year along the way. Carla never thought about account location. She just bought funds in whatever account was easiest. Over 30 years, that one. Oversight quietly handed tens of thousands of dollars to the IRS that John simply kept. Same effort, same funds. One of them just paid attention to where the money lived. There's a third destroyer, and it's the one nobody talks about. It's called sequence of returns risk. And it's the reason the years right after you hit 500,000 matter more than any years. That come later. Here's the idea. When your portfolio is at its biggest, a crash does its most damage. A 30% drop on $50,000 is $15,000. The same 30% drop on $500,000 is $150,000. Gone. Let that sink in. $150,000 is more than most people earn in 2 full years. And it can vanish in a single bad quarter right when your balance is largest. The research is brutal on this. Studies show roughly 77% of your portfolio's final outcome is decided by the returns in just the first 10 years. The early years aren't just important. They quietly decide almost everything that follows. So here's the trap that destroys people. They hit 500,000. The market drops 25%. They watch $125,000 disappear in months, and they panic. They sell. They move to cash to stop the bleeding. It feels responsible. It feels safe. It is the single most expensive mistake an investor can make because they locked in the loss, and then they miss the recovery that always, eventually comes. Here's what John understood that Carla's panic-selling neighbor didn't. A paper loss isn't a real loss until you sell. When John's portfolio dropped $100,000 in 2022, he did the hardest thing in all of investing, nothing. He kept his job, he kept his contributions, he let the dip buy shares on sale. 2 years later, not only had he recovered, he was further ahead than if the crash had never happened. Doing nothing was his best financial move of the decade. Now compare that to the neighbor who sold. He moved his $400,000 to cash at the bottom. He felt smart for about 3 weeks. Then the market climbed 26% without him. He didn't just lose money, he lost the recovery. And by the time he felt brave enough to get back in, he was buying the same shares back at a much higher price. He turned a temporary dip into a permanent hole. That's how the 500,000 really dies. And here's the detail that makes panic selling so deadly at this number. The market does most of its work on a handful of days. Miss the 10 best days over a couple of decades, and your final balance can be cut roughly in half. The problem is, those best days almost always come right after the worst ones. The neighbor who sold to feel safe sold himself out of the recovery. He wasn't being cautious. He was guaranteeing the one outcome he feared most. At 500,000, the cost of flinching is no longer small. This is why the years right after you hit $500,000 are so fragile. Your balance is big enough that a crash hurts badly, and your nerves are new enough that you've never been tested at this size. A 25% drop when you had 50,000 was a bad week. A 25% drop when you have 500,000 feels like the floor falling out. Same percentage. Completely different feeling. And it's the feeling, not the percentage, that makes people sell. Let's talk about the fourth destroyer, because this one wears a disguise. It's the disguise of doing something. At 500,000, people suddenly feel like they should be more sophisticated. Index funds feel too boring for a half-millionaire, so they start tinkering. They chase the hot stock. They try options. They follow a guy online who promises to beat the market. And almost every time, the tinkering costs them more than the boredom ever would have. Here's what nobody tells you about getting fancy at 500,000. The strategy that got you here is usually the strategy that gets you to $1 million. Boring, consistent, low-cost investing built that $500,000. There's no reason to abandon it now. But the bigger the number, the louder the temptation to be clever. And cleverness, for most investors, is just a more expensive way to be wrong. The market doesn't pay you for excitement, it pays you for patience. There's a fifth destroyer, and it's the one people are too embarrassed to mention. At 500,000, you start to look rich to the people around you. The word spreads. Suddenly, there's a brother with a business idea, a friend who needs a bridge loan, a cousin who's sure this is the opportunity. John got 3 of these calls the same year he hit $500,000. Each one came wrapped in love and guilt, and each one was a quiet test of whether his money was really his. Here's the hard truth about lending the money you've saved. A loan to family is usually a gift you haven't admitted to yet. The money rarely comes back, and the relationship rarely survives the asking. This isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. John learned to give what he could truly afford to lose, and to call it a gift out loud with no expectation. Everything else he protected. Because a portfolio loaned away in pieces dies just as surely as one lost in a crash. It just dies more politely. And there's a quieter version of this same risk, concentration. A lot of people hit 500,000 with half of it tied up in one thing: their company stock. A single hot pick that ran, their employer's options. It feels great on the way up. But a portfolio that's half one stock isn't wealth, it's a bet. If that one company stumbles, years of progress can evaporate in a week. The whole point of reaching this number is that you no longer need to gamble, so stop gambling. Spread it out and let boring keep you rich. So what should you actually do the moment you hit 500,000? First, protect the engine. Make sure you have term life insurance if anyone depends on your income, if your family relies on your paycheck, and something happens to you that $500,000 has to carry the whole load. A simple term policy costs a few $100s a year. It's not exciting, but it's the difference between a setback and a catastrophe for the people you love. Second, check your fees today. Pull up every account. Find the expense ratio on every fund you own. If you're paying more than a fraction of a percent or handing 1% a year to an advisor, you now know exactly what that costs over your lifetime, more than your entire $500,000. Moving from a 1% fund to a 0.05% index fund might be the highest paying 10 minutes of work you ever do. Third, write down your crash plan before the crash. Decide right now, while you're calm, exactly what you'll do when your portfolio drops 30%, because it will. The answer for almost everyone is the same. Keep buying, keep your job, touch nothing. The investors who win aren't the ones who dodge the crash. They're the ones who already decided in advance not to flinch. Your future self can't be trusted in a panic. So tie your own hands now. Fourth, automate the boring stuff and walk away. Set your contributions to move on their own. Invest half of every raise before you ever see it. Then stop checking the balance every day. The $500,000 doesn't grow because you watch it. It grows because you leave it alone. The single greatest skill at this stage isn't picking winners. It's building a system so simple and so automatic that your worst instincts never get a vote. Fifth, write down your number and your why. 500,000 is the moment to ask what you're actually building toward. Is it freedom at 55? Is it never needing a job you hate? Without a target, your money has no job, and idle money is the easiest money to waste. John knew his number. He knew what each year of saving bought him in freedom. Carla just watched a balance go up, with no finish line in mind, which is exactly why she kept spending. A goal you can name is a goal you can protect, and one more quiet move that pays for decades. Rebalance once a year, then forget it. When stocks run hot, trim a little back toward your plan. When they crash, your plan tells you to buy more, not less. That's it. No predictions. No watching the news. Just one calm afternoon a year, doing the unglamorous thing on purpose. The investors who reach $1 million aren't smarter than the ones stuck at 500,000. They've just removed themselves from the decision. They follow a system that doesn't care how they feel that morning. Now here's the counterintuitive twist almost no one sees coming. The danger of 500,000 isn't that it's too little. It's that it's just enough. Just enough to feel like you've arrived. Just enough to relax exactly when you should be sharpest. 500,000 is the first time your behavior matters more than your income. For 20 years, how much you saved was the whole game. Now, how you behave is the whole game. And nobody tells you the rules changed. Think about what that really means. A 22-year-old with $1,000 can do almost nothing wrong. The number is too small to matter. But a 40-year-old with 500,000 can undo a decade of work in a single panicked afternoon. The bigger the pile, the more your temperament, not your intelligence, decides your future. The $500,000 doesn't test how smart you are. It tests whether you can sit still while everyone around you is running. Here's the line worth remembering. The first 500,000 is built by your savings. The next 500,000 is protected by your behavior. John understood that. Carla learned it the hard way, 10 years after that. Tuesday morning, John's account had grown past $1 million, mostly on autopilot. Carla, who saved just as hard, was still circling 600,000, bled slowly by lifestyle creep, and won too many clever bets. Same start, wildly different ends. And the only thing that separated them wasn't luck. It wasn't income. It wasn't some secret investment. It was what they did in the moment they felt like they'd already won. That feeling of arrival is the most expensive feeling in personal finance. It shows up right when the stakes are highest and your guard is lowest. The people who keep their wealth are the ones who treat 500,000 not as a trophy, but as a warning. So if you're anywhere near this number, here's the one thing to hold on to. Hitting 500,000 doesn't mean the hard part is over. It means the hard part just changed shape. It stopped being about how much you can save. It started being about how still you can sit. The math is now on your side, working harder than you ever could. Your only job is to not get in its way. The next time you watch your account cross a big round number, and you feel that rush of finally making it pause, that rush is not your friend. Ask yourself one question. Am I about to protect this, or am I about to spend it, fee it, or panic it away? Because the $500,000 won't be destroyed by the market. It'll be destroyed by the person holding it in the exact moment they stop paying attention. If this showed you something about your money you hadn't seen before, subscribe to Wealth Logic and hit the notification bell. We break down the hidden math behind the financial decisions you face every day. No hustle culture, no shame. Just the numbers nobody else will show you. Because the most important financial decision you'll ever make is knowing the difference between a strategy that's right for you and a sales pitch that's right for someone else. Do the math. Make the decision that matches your reality, not someone else's.